Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Gopi Janaballabha Giridharidhari Gopi Janaballabha Giridharidhari Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Yashoda Nandana Braja Janaranjana Jamuna Tira Vanachari Yamuna Tira Vanachari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Jai Radha Madhava Kunja Bihari Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Jai Vishwam Sabadala Jagacharya. Sto Desa Srimad A.C. Bhakti Vedanta Swami Maharaj Srila Prabhupada ki. Jai Om Vishnu Padam Sabharara Jagacharya Stote Sadasi Srimad Bhakti Siddhanta Saraswati Thakur Prabhupada ki. Gaur Premanandi. Hare Krishna. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Om Namo Bhagavate Vasudevaya. Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 4, Chapter 12, Dhruva Maharaj goes back to Godhead. Text 35. Trilokim Devayanina Sotivraja Muninapi Parastadya Dhruva Gatir Vishnu Padam Atabhyagat Trilokim Devayanina Sotivraja Munin Api Parastadya Dhruva Gatir Vishnu Padam Atabhyagat Trilokim Devayanina Sotivraja Munin Api Parastadya Dhruva Gatir Vishnu Padam Atabhyagat You want to change?
Trilokim Devayanena Sotivraja Muninapi Parastadya Dhruva Gatir Vishnu Padam Atabhyagat
Trilokim, the three planetary systems. Devayanena, by the transcendental airplane. Sa, Dhruva. Ativraja, having surpassed. Muni, great sages. Api, even. Padastat, beyond. Yat, which. Dhruva Gati, Dhruva, who attained permanent life. Vishnu, of Lord Vishnu. Padam, abode. Ata, then. Abhyagat, achieved. Translation. Dhruva Maharaj thus surpassed the 7 planetary systems of the great sages, who are known as Saptarshi. Beyond that region, he achieved the transcendental situation of permanent life in the planet where Lord Vishnu lives. Purport. The airplane was piloted by the 2 chief associates of Lord Vishnu, namely Sunanda and Nanda. Only such spiritual astronauts can pilot their airplane beyond the 7 planets and arrive in the region of eternal blissful life. It is confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita also, parastasmat tu pavonya, that beyond this planetary system begins the spiritual sky where everything is permanent and blissful. The planets there are known as Vishnu Loka or Vaikuntha Loka. Only there can one get an eternal blissful life of knowledge. Below Vaikuntha Loka is the material universe, where Lord Brahma and others in Brahma Loka can live until the annihilation of this universe. But that life is not permanent. That is also confirmed in the Bhagavad Gita. Abrahma Bhuvana Loka. Even if one goes to the topmost planet, one cannot achieve eternal life. Only by arriving in Vaikuntha Loka can one live an eternally blissful life. Translation again. Dhruva Maharaj thus surpassed the 7 planetary systems of the great sages, who are known as Saptarishi. Beyond that region, he achieved the transcendental situation of permanent life in the planet where Lord Vishnu lives. Om Gana Timirandasya Gananjana Shalakaya Chakshun Militang Yena Tasmai Sri Gurave Namaha. Jai Sri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Sri Advaita Gadadhara Sri Vasari Gaura Bhakta Vrinda. Hare Krishna 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 Hare 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 Rama 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 Hare Hare. With our properly purified senses, we are meant to be captivated by this information. Naturally, you would wonder, if this information doesn't rouse me, then what does that say about my sense perception and my consciousness? We'd have to conclude that due to the pollution of our consciousness, we're fascinated by the temporary, or at least will put up with the temporary because we're not inspired by anything beyond the asat, beyond what is temporary. In other words, we're not prioritizing properly, we're not perceiving properly. Therefore, this information given in Srimad Bhagavatam is meant to purify us from the desensitization that occurs due to our contact with the material energy. We become dulled in that this information about the spiritual world apparently doesn't rouse us, doesn't motivate us. And in fact, what is described here can seem to be so distant, so remote, and even not very pivotal for our life as we're currently living it. We have to put up with struggles in this world, and we're happy to put up with the pleasures of this world. When we hear, however, about the spiritual world, Dhruva Maharaj is going back to Godhead. It's very interesting, but we may fail to receive the full impact a resounding desire to abandon our attachments for this temporary plane and do the necessary for achieving real life in association with Krishna. Prahlad Maharaj explains in the 7th canto of Bhagavatam, Matirna Krishna Padatotova Mito Pibhajeta Grihavatana. If one is so determined to remain attached to the asat, the temporary, it's practically impossible for the spark of bhakti to ignite because of that ferocious attachment, which Prahlad Maharaj describes as Grihavrata. You're dedicated to material life with a vow. This is it, and we are going to make all of it that we can. With that kind of determined spirit, Prahlad says it's practically impossible to be Krishna conscious. Your inclinations will not be ignited, whether you're on your own or whether you're in some kind of collective. The great tragedy of human life is to think that the best we can do is to improve the situation here. All our energies should be focused in that way. And if in the process of trying to improve the situation here, we get some pleasure, that's as good as it gets. I was speaking Thursday night at the Mantra House in Los Angeles. I was very surprised that 80 young persons showed up. Some from USC, some from UCLA, some from UC Long Beach even. And in talking with them, I could see the effect of the current propaganda. The bottom line is always the same. Do the best you can now to enjoy yourself now. And while you're at it, enjoying the now, try to secure the best possible future enjoyment. And that's it. So many students were telling me that various versions of the same thing. It's all about just breathing in the now. And this is supposed to be very deep, you see. Don't laugh. No, you Hare Krishnas, are just cynics. You have to take it seriously. Just breathe. Breathe in the now. Yes, the now. That's what it's all about. Don't you get it?
I get it.
If you can have some momentary satisfaction, that's as good as it gets. And in order to squeeze every possible moment of every possible satisfaction, you've got to really focus. If you want to savor the temporary, you're not supposed to think that it's going to end. You're supposed to be totally immersed in the experience and rejoice about that experience. By rejoicing about your temporary thrills, you can prolong the bang that you get from them. Even just a few seconds makes it all worthwhile. So this is what life is about. You breathe in, you breathe out. Calm yourself by breathing. Focus on your temporary enjoyment more by deep breathing. And that's it. Prahlad Maharaj says that whether you're breathing in or breathing out, Patantiyadonadritayusma. You are gliding towards a disastrous situation. I always like that choice of words by Srila Prabhupada. Gliding towards a hellish situation. You can see yourself in a glider, majestically floating through the sky. But where are you heading to? What's the use in having a beautiful glider ride if you're going to crash? But no. Patantiyadonadritayusma. You're gliding. And you totally forget where you're gliding toward and what's your ultimate destination. Sometimes people think that bhakti is against improving the current situation altogether, which is not true. It's just that we have priorities. Naturally, we are all for human beings living sanely, living in a way that they're not destroying their own environment, they're not politically and economically exploiting one another. At the same time, we recognize that no matter how you improve the current situation, it's not going to last. And there is a realm, there is an existence where everything does last. So our bhakti is a balanced approach. How to have the best now and the best later. We're not just mesmerized by a future hope of Vaikuntha, and then that makes us powerless and unable to do anything about our current situation. Those devoid of any kind of spiritual understanding think that the bhakti processes are pie in the sky and failing to solve the pressing problems around us. One professor of secularism, he's a specialist in that field, said, look, face the facts. If there's crime in your city, are you just going to pray about it, or are you going to think of measures how to reduce crime? It never occurred to him that, why not do both? A false dichotomy is created. You're just focused on the hereafter. You're totally neglecting what's going on around you. Of course, the humble devotee points out that you say that you are completely thinking about the present context and how to solve the problems. Well, why don't you solve the problems then? Give us some evidence that your material focus is actually making headway and solving problems. Instead, we see the same thing over and over and over again, because there's a failure in cleaning the heart. There's no program, no adequate program for cleansing the heart, and therefore the same old contaminations in the heart produce the same old problems. Whereas the bhakti process, by cleansing the heart, creates the ability to deal better with the present situation and gives you the best future destination. I was speaking a couple of weeks ago at the University of Pennsylvania. Always a challenge because it's an Ivy League school and they think they have achieved beyond the Saptarishi. So I was explaining, as I often do, about the destructive capacity of this current version of human beings. And in speaking about that point, I gave some information that I spoke about, I think, in Mayapur this year. I said, did you know that on just one nuclear-armed submarine in the U.S. Navy is enough nuclear firepower to exceed whatever atomic bomb was dropped on Hiroshima or Nagasaki. Exceed that by 2,000 times, just on one submarine. In Navy slang, they're called boomers, these submarines. More technically, the Ohio class. So, it was the University of Pennsylvania, elitist, but students had no idea. I said, just see. You say that you're so focused on the present, you don't even understand what's going on. So afterwards, when it was time for questions, one clean-cut young man came up to me, and it turned out he was in the U.S. Navy. He was an officer. He had been walking through the Penn campus, and a devotee had invited him to the program. So he was sitting through my lecture, and of course he heard the part about the boomer. So he came up to me afterwards, and later one devotee who was in the military explained to me what he was indicating, because this man couldn't admit straightforwardly that he was serving on a nuclear submarine. So he just came up to me and said, you know, I heard your point then. Yes, I've walked past missile tubes on boats like that. So the devotee who was in the Navy before, who was with me, said, you just don't walk, not anyone can walk past missile tubes on a submarine. That means he's stationed on a nuclear-armed submarine, but he can't directly say so. He said, well, you know, it's all about protection. We're giving protection. So I looked at him and said, can you please explain to me what exactly are you protecting? And never thought about it that way. We're just protecting. I said, well, are you protecting the Walmarts? Or are you protecting the shopping malls? Or what exactly are you protecting? He said, well, you know, it's the Chinese. They're building up massive naval power in the Pacific. I said, your whole country's in hock to the Chinese anyway, so please tell me, what are you protecting? Well, we don't want to live under any kind of communistic or imperialistic regime. I said, okay, but you're living under the control of huge multinational corporations. Yeah, that's true. I said, can you please explain to me what exactly are you protecting? Because he was kind of like a real kshatriya. He was really into maintaining law and order, protecting his country from negative influences. But he couldn't explain to me. I waited for about 5 minutes, 10 minutes. I kept asking, can you please give me something definitive? Give me a definitive understanding of what you are protecting. And he couldn't do it. And he was quite flustered afterwards. God, I never thought about it in that way. What am I protecting? What gives me the right to staff a nuclear-armed submarine which contains the firepower to exceed what happened to Hiroshima or Nagasaki by 2,000 times, just one submarine? So here we are saying that we're so expert, we're focusing on the present. We're not distracted by the information about Dhruva Maharaj attaining the spiritual world. It's pie in the sky. It lifts your consciousness up from the real world, which requires every ounce of our concentration to solve the problems. But how are you solving the problems? Give us a leg to stand on. Show us how you're not simply repeating the same mess again and again and again. The fear is there that by lifting my vision to the spiritual world, I'll be incompetent in my affairs in this material world. Not only will I be incompetent, but I'll be irresponsible. Of course, one has to understand what is the real responsibility. The Krishna Bhaktas are the most responsible persons. They're executing the prime purpose of human life. Yet some people think that by focusing on the information of the spiritual world, automatically you become disqualified to function in the material world. This is supposedly a Christian country. 75% of Americans still in some way identify as Christians. So I often point out, according to the Bible they have, Jesus, who taught bhakti yoga in such a simple, elementary way, instructed that you have to be in the world but not of the world. So I explain that this is actually high spiritual technology. This is bhakti mysticism. How can you exist in the world and not be a product of the world? Not identify with the world? It's like someone saying to you, live submerged in the ocean, but don't get wet. So Jesus gave that statement, but he didn't elaborate. He didn't present the applied spiritual technology for executing that goal, achieving that goal. We have the example of Arjuna in Bhagavad Gita. Krishna told him, Mama Nusma Yujam Cha, fight and think of me. So it is not what the spiritually uneducated person would think, that by focusing on Krishna, you become irresponsible and unable to properly address the problems of this world. In India, often persons have another hurdle, another barrier, self-created barrier, that if I take too much to bhakti, if I allow in my life too much Krishna, then I'll lose my competitive edge at the college, at the workplace. So I have to hit the mark just right. Often the parents of young men from India tell them, you go to the mandir, that's all right, every Janmashtami, that is fine. But every week, this is not necessary. There's this conception that if you allow yourself to become too attracted by Krishna, you're no longer able to swim with the sharks and compete and be on the razor-sharp edge necessary for grand material attainment. So all these prejudices and misconceptions are there because we can't understand how everything is Krishna's energy. Not simply the spiritual world, but also the material world is Krishna's energy. The most advantageous situation is to take information from the source of all energy, how to deal with all of his energies. That is the expertise of bhakti. We take information about the spiritual world, and because Krishna is the proprietor of the material world, we also take information from Krishna, how to live in the material world. And this is a far more ingenious position than just breathing in the now. But you'll be surprised. This is the best that so many, especially young people, have today. Of course, in California, it's not just the young, it's also the older generation too. Just breathe in the now, just be with the moment. That's as best as it gets. But what is the composition of that moment? The so-called moment of the present is composed of the past, and it's influencing the future. So I point out that there's no such thing as a now that has no relation to what came before or what will happen in the future. This is what it means to be conditioned. You're chained by your past, and you're imprisoning your future. All that's going on in the now. So while you're breathing in now, you're breathing in your past karmic burdens, and you're creating future karmic burdens. So there's no such thing as a now that's detached from all the conditioning of the past and all the conditioning you're creating for the future. How do you get out of this trap? How do you escape such a chain of action and reaction, which affects your happiness, which affects your satisfaction? Due to the effect of illusory energy, we think that, okay, here's some potential enjoyment. I just interact with that potential enjoyment, things happen, and hey, that's it. But everything you do for your personal and private pleasure is so dependent on conditions. It's not like you have a clear shot at happiness. No, your endeavors are bound by so many conditions. So where is the so-called freedom to enjoy? There's so many contingencies, conditions, complexities you have to deal with in your so-called innocent attempt to enjoy. All this baggage is here from the past, and you are creating future impacts that will affect you later. So how is it that we are so competent to try for material happiness when we have to take countless conditions into consideration? How is my body feeling? How is my mind feeling? Do I have enough money? What do the people around me think? What's the economic situation? What's the political situation? What's the weather like? On and on and on it goes. We do this so routinely that we forget about it. We're constantly calculating the conditions. And yet we think we're free to enjoy. And then when we hear information about the spiritual world, it sounds so far away, sounds so exotic. But actually our attempts to enjoy in this world are so exotic in that they're subject to so many barriers and conditions. But we take that as normal. I like the way Srila Prabhupada explains that we concede to a life of material enjoyment. Like, well, this is as best as it gets, what can you do, Yeah. I didn't make the world this way. I call this the resignation theory. What do you want out of me? I didn't make the world like this. I'm just an innocent, ordinary person trying to be happy. This is as best as it gets. What can you do? Breathe in the now. That's it. Take things as they come. Try to enjoy for yourself. Try to help a few people around you. Don't hurt anyone purposely. Leave it at that. So this information about Dhruva Maharaj, going back to Godhead, for one who senses are purified in the bhakti process, it inspires you not only for the future, but also for dealing with the now. In other words, your present existence has the highest purpose. And by pursuing that highest purpose, you're able to give the best benefit even in the present, by pursuing the highest purpose for the future. As Jesus is supposed to have said, be in the world but not of the world. That affects the later, the hereafter, and the now. Because one who is properly inspired by this information of Vaikuntha is then able to properly help persons in the present, properly help your very self. We're getting an introduction here to Vaikuntha. Krishna explains in Bhagavad Gita, Parastasmat Bhavanyo. There is another realm. By hearing about that other realm, we don't become incompetent in dealing with the present. In fact, we become more competent. We see everything in proper perspective. How to properly handle the future as well as the present. So there's none of this false dichotomy that, we're just living for the hereafter. We have no idea what to do right now. Past, present, and future are three phases of time, and time is the impersonal manifestation of Krishna. So the bhakti yogi is not intimidated by time in any of its phases. He or she knows how to handle all the three phases of time. This is true expertise. And when we start to try to understand the spiritual world by hearing from authority, we can even understand that there is beyond Vaikuntha. This especially comes out in the discussions Chaitanya Mahaprabhu was having with his associates after Rath Yatra. The Vrindavan pastimes, when the goddess of fortune comes to pursue Lord Jagannath. Why did he leave Dwarka to go to Vrindavan? Lord Chaitanya's associates are watching the whole Leela. They can see it. And Srup Damodar, after seeing the goddess of fortune and her associates attack the servitors of Lord Jagannath, attack the Rath cart, Srup Damodar turns to Mahaprabhu and says, I've never seen any mana, any egoistic pride like this. But actually, Srup Damodar is signaling Lord Chaitanya, it's time to talk about Gopi Mana, the pride of the gopis in Vrindavan. He's changing the discussion. Let's go deeper. Let's go to the top of the spiritual world. So Srup Damodar says that the moroseness I usually see in Krishna Leela, Satyabhama in Dwarka, scratching the ground with her toenails, being morose, downcast, and the moroseness I see among the gopis in Vrindavan, it's nothing like what we're seeing here. The goddess of fortune and her associates attacking. So this discussion then launches into a beautifully friendly debate between Srivas Thakur and Srup Damodar. Srup Damodar outlines a whole presentation of the different types of egoistic pride in Vrindavan. And Chaitanya Mahaprabhu urges him on, tell me more, tell me more. Becomes very confidential as Srup Damodar explains the various bhava bhusar, the ecstatic ornaments of Krishna's dearmost consort, Srimati Radharani. At that point, Srivas Thakur has to explode. in glorifying Vaikuntha. What is all this talk about flowers and leaves and forest minerals of Vrindavan? Don't you see the opulence of Vaikuntha? Don't you see what my goddess of fortune is all about? She sits on a throne. What can the gopis do? They simply deal with boiling milk and churning it into yogurt. My Lakshmi Devi sits on a throne of jewels. At this point, Lord Chaitanya intervenes. In other words, you're having a very beautifully, transcendently friendly debate about Vaikuntha versus Goloka Vrindavan. Lord Chaitanya explains the situation. Srivas Thakur, you're talking like this because you're Narada Swabhava. You are in the bhava of Narada Muni, because that's actually Srivas Thakur's identity. Sup Damodar makes his presentation to counter the so-called opulence of Vaikuntha. Oh, you say that nothing can compare to the majesty, the jewels, the royal opulence of Vaikuntha? Well, in Vrindavan, there is the ground which is like Chintamani, touchstone. The trees are all Kalpavriksha, wish-fulfilling trees. The water is nectar. Every step is a dance. Every word is a song. He goes on describing the glories of Goloka Vrindavan. At that point, Srivas Thakur is overwhelmed by hearing about it. Even though he's Narada Muni, he has a different bhav. Still, the information about Goloka Vrindavan sends his head spinning, and he begins to dance while slapping under his armpits, making noises. And then Mahaprabhu starts to dance. Then everyone starts to dance and have such a wild kirtan, because they're all enthralled by all this information about Vaikuntha and then Goloka Vrindavan. The kirtan becomes so intense that Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appears in the form of Srimati Radharani. And Nityananda respectfully watches from a distance, because this is very intimate, very confidential. The kirtan continues and continues and continues. Finally, Sup Damodar intervenes, because the devotees are all transcendentally exhausted, but Mahaprabhu is going on, dancing. All this triggered by a discussion about the spiritual world, which for the associates of Mahaprabhu is not something far away, vague, and remote. It's their ever-present reality. It's part of their now. So upon Sup Damodar's intervention, because actually only Nityananda, Krishna's Kaviraj Goswami says, only Nityananda could stop the kirtan. He doesn't do anything, but Sup Damodar is able to explain to Mahaprabhu that the devotees are all exhausted. So they all take rest in a flower garden. So this is real life. Hearing about the spiritual world while practically addressing the problems of the here and now. Prahlad Maharaj says that he's simultaneously happy and unhappy. For himself, he's got no problems. He's happy, but he's unhappy about seeing the unnecessary suffering all around him in material existence. Maya Sukhaya Bharam Udvahato Vimudan. I'm unhappy seeing how conditioned souls are struggling by carrying a false burden. It's one thing to struggle under a real burden, but to struggle under a false burden? How pathetic. How horrible. So Prahlad says, I'm simply thinking of them. Although for myself, I'm always floating in the Mahamrita, the nectarian ocean of hearing and chanting about Krishna. But because I'm so concerned with the others, I don't want to go back to Godhead without making arrangements for them to go also. So this is the heart of a real Vaishnava. The most practical. How to deal with the future, how to deal with the now. By constantly hearing of what the Bhagavatam is imparting to us, we become more and more sensitive to that information. It's not just theory or theology that we're hearing, or a belief system. We're hearing transformational information. The more we hear it, the more we become transformed, because our senses are becoming more and more purified, and our attraction for Krishna is increasing. By the way, the information is acting upon us. All right, any questions? Comments? Jai Bhadrinarayan Maharaj.
Well, I have several questions. In my traditional role, devil's advocate. You know, right here in SanDiego, there were these, what was the name of that cult that thought there was I don't remember the name, but I remember the incident. Yeah.
Haribo. Haribo.
You just say by constantly hearing its transformation. Well, you hear anything long enough, you become brainwashed. You know, you just keep, you cut off your other sources, you hear this repeated information, and after a while you believe it. These people all took cyanide or something, lay down with their purple quilts over them, and thought they were going to catch some comet and go to Mars or wherever they were going, just because they kept hearing it. So that's one thing. But the other thing I wanted to say, you know, which hooks into it a little bit, this is just, you know, it's a formula for futility. You say that nothing's being accomplished in this world. It's just, you know, repeating the same thing. Or, you know, what have you actually solved? What are you protecting? And they just become paralyzed and dream of this better world. And you take easy examples. I'm almost done. You take easy examples. But, I mean, look what we've done in the medical field. I mean, we've actually practically, you know, babies that will be dead. I mean, I've got a pacemaker. You know, we've done so many things. Liver transplants. We are actually on the front line pushing back the miseries that you say can't be solved. So you just, you know, keep hearing this fantasy world, and okay, you think that's your now, but we're actually doing something.
We give you credit for your pacemaker, especially if your pacemaker, allowing such gallant service to continue for some years in this world and then on into eternity, wherever Krishna sends you. So we're grateful for that. We're grateful for medical advances. Although I have to point out, my middle brother, he just retired as president of the Michigan Pediatricians Association, and he was a CEO managing doctor of a huge medical charity, funded with $200 million every year. And he's also involved in the Flint water crisis. And he solemnly told all his family members, if I'm ever sick in my final days or my final years, don't send me to a hospital. I know what goes on there. Don't send me to a hospital. So we'll give you credit. We'll give you credit for tinkering a bit with material progress and making some incremental improvements. But what is the overall picture? In the fourth canto of Bhagavatam, the situation of the human beings under the reign of Maharaj Vena is described as there being ants on a log with fire at both ends. And basically that's what's going on today. On the one hand, you have the threat of nuclear weaponry. That's a fire at one end of the log. On the other end, to whatever degree of the impact, there certainly is an impact, to whatever degree, we'll see, but you have climate change. What can you do about that? These young people, those under 30, are terrified right now about climate change. It's a different ballgame than the adults. I'm shocked to find it out. It's on their mind. Like, we're coming of age in a world that's been screwed up. How can they do that to us? What about our enjoyment? It's called intergenerational tyranny, that the older generation screws up the world for the younger generation and leaves the whole mess to the younger generation, saying to them that you'll figure something out. Something is always figured out.
Ours, bye-bye.
Yes, we're not going to be around, but we trust human progress. You'll come up with a solution, so don't worry. So amongst those who are under 30, the paranoia about climate change, to whatever degree it's going to be there, is markedly greater than what the adults are experiencing. They're in anxiety about it. So much so that the American Psychological Association has established a new anxiety, which is called eco-anxiety. Like, just the environmental havoc goes on and on. You can't do anything about it. It's so long and drawn out. All our endeavors to stop it are futile. That's what the young people are feeling. So for us, about to depart from this world, we may not take it as so impactful. But these young people, they're thinking, this is our turn to enjoy, and what's happened, it's not fair. And we can't do anything about it. So on the one hand, you have nuclear weaponry. And on the other hand, you have climate change. One professor at Yale calls this pair the apocalyptic twins. So what can you do about it? So yes, we give you credit for pacemakers and medical breakthroughs, but the overall picture is one of destruction. So we have to look at the whole picture and not just focus on little incidentals here and there, which certainly do, in a very measured way, improve the quality of life. But it's like, here's another example. In many states that still have capital punishment in the USA, the prisoners who are on death row before they're executed are allowed to choose their last meal. Whatever they want to have, the cooks will prepare. Texas used to be big on that, but they just changed their law because one death row person about to be executed ordered a huge, expensive, exotic menu, of all kinds of abominable exotic foods. Give me caviar, give me this, give me frog's legs, give me lobsters, on and on it went. But still, in quite a few states that have capital punishment, you, before you're executed, can choose your last meal. Now, isn't that great? Isn't that humane? The cooks, however, I saw an interview with the prison cooks who prepare these last meals. Most of the time, the prisoners want comfort food, burgers, chips, ice cream. Sometimes they want something more exotic. The cooks say, this is a joke. The guy he'll be dead before his stomach digests the food. So you would say it's something, right? He's enjoying in the now, even though he'll never digest the food. He gets the sensation of eating his comfort food. It's something. But any intelligent person will say, but look at the end result for him. It's horrible. Whether he deserves to die or not, still, he's executed. So we're like that. We pick out these little items and forget to see the overall picture. That humanity is cut off from Krishna's instructions, the usual destructive force. The destruction may come this way, it may come that way, but it's always there. So yes, we do give credit where credit's due. Thank you for creating such wonderful last meals. And about hearing about Krishna, mesmerizing you, you hear about anything over and over again, you become attuned to that and you think that's the only reality. Hearing about Krishna is not a recently concocted spiritual technology. That's why we have so much information, just as we're reading today. We're not just relying on our own sensory inputs. We're not just relying on our own intelligence. Through Srimad Bhagavatam, we're in contact with the most brilliant persons who have the most profound experiences and are giving us the process by which we can also experience it, and the naysayer can also experience it. I come across this, something like what you're saying often in speaking at universities, that the benign well-wishers, we respect your belief system. Everyone, in other words, everyone's entitled to a belief system. I have mine, you have yours. Hey, whatever makes you happy, whatever gets you through the night, believe in it, brother. We're all for it. We're not prejudiced. And another aspect of that same angle is, look, we're not like historians of 100 years ago who were condemning myth. Now we recognize that myth has value. Oh, yes. The motifs of mythology give deep insight into the human existential situation. So we're not like the British historians of the past condemning the myths of the ancient Indian people. There's value in those myths. The underlying patterns and themes can inspire human beings in whatever their journey is. It's all right. You've got the Krishna myth, fine. Someone else has the Jesus myth, fine. Someone else has the secular myth, okay. Just whatever, Let's just all live in peace together with our own personal myths. Yes, sure.
What's your answer, Mark? Sounds good to me.
What makes Bhagavad Gita unique is that it's presenting a process by which, if you so choose, you can verify the information. But we can't get around the point of your choosing. Do you want to enter the laboratory or not? That always has to be your choice. Because the bhakti knowledge, in fact, all of Vedic knowledge, is state-specific. According to your state of consciousness, that determines what you can understand. It's not that you can act in any kind of way and understand the same thing as someone who acts in another way. Your state of consciousness allows you to understand certain things or not understand certain things. This is a fundamental pillar of Vedic epistemology, the science of knowing. It's not that I can act in any kind of way and then open up Chaitanya Charitamrita and understand Chaitanya Leela and write commentaries on it. Remember Professor Dimmock? Back in his day, the foremost authority on Chaitanya Charitamrita, speaking about Mahaprabhu's intimate pastimes while chain-smoking cigarettes. So the West The Western idea is that your personal behavior and lifestyle have nothing to do with your intellectual capacity. There's a total disconnect. I can act in this way, that way, doesn't matter. I have my cognitive abilities, my academic abilities, they're unaffected by whatever my lifestyle choice is. But Bhagavad Gita says completely different. You're carving out for yourself a standpoint in the modes of material nature according to a particular blend, and that standpoint affects what you can understand. So Krishna explains in the 17th chapter of Bhagavad Gita, even your conceptions and your beliefs are products of contact with the modes of material nature. So unless you have a program for changing your relationship to the modes of material nature, you're always going to be bound up by a certain way of looking at things. So the bhakti process is transformational if you choose, and you always have the choice. If you choose to enter the bhakti laboratory, you can experience what Krishna says. There'll be something immediately that you can experience, and you'll be able to see the road signs up ahead. Just like you're coming to SanDiego, 50 miles more to SanDiego. You're not in SanDiego yet, but you can see confirmation along the way. So that is the advantage of living your life, flying your plane according to the Shastra. It's not that we're just relying on our own tiny faculties, and therefore we can easily be bamboozled, easily be brainwashed. No, we're listening to the greatest personalities and the greatest knowledge, and they're giving us the means to verify what they say. Of course, we have to choose, just like you choose to go to university. You choose to take courses. You don't attend the University of California, SanDiego, and the professor's lecturing, and you just say, look, you're just conditioning me. You're just downloading upon me information that's mesmerizing me. It may be true, but you don't say that. You go there to be educated, to be informed. So why not at least give Srimad Bhagavatam that kind of chance that you would give to a mundane authority? Because as Srila Prabhupada would always explain, unless you accept the need for authoritative knowledge, you can't make any advancement, even materially. So yes, you may not be able to experience the spiritual world in its fullness overnight, but once the cleansing of the heart begins, you can start to appreciate that you're different from your body. Cheto darpanam arjanam, bhavamaha dagni nivapanam. The blazing fire of material existence reduces. These are practical experiences you can get from the very beginning. And that's why persons start to chant Hare Krishna. They're pleasantly surprised that their consciousness changes. All right, anything else? Hare Krishna, Lord Srila Prabhupada.